Hi, this is Kevin, Map Practical. Tonight we're going to be working in Model Builder in ArcGIS Pro. I have this little exercise where we try to figure out where the best places to live in the United States are. So if you look at all the cities in the United States, it's kind of overwhelming. But I have a lot of students who are graduating, finishing up their degree, and they might be trying to figure out, where do I want to live? So the point is to reduce this mass down to just a few places that you might find interesting. So I've created a model that looks at average income, population density, average education, so on and so forth. And when you run it through, then it will choose only the cities that meet all of those curricula. All right, so Bend, that's a nice place to live, right? Kalispell, not too bad. A couple other places, Grand Junction. I would live in Montrose, is really nice. Page, a lot of nice canyoneering and things around there. And St. George, close to Zion, but a little hot. But anyways, this all depends on all this data in here. So what I have is average temperature for the United States for the last 30 years. This is PRISM data coming out of University of Oregon. Let's see if we can open it up and take a look. Yep, so it's an average for the entire year, right? So to get to an average of only 23 degrees, it has to be pretty darn cold. But on the other side of that, to get to an average of 77, it has to have cold and then also some hot. So you have to kind of, figure out, it's not the average temperature that you would like to have, it's for the entire year, right? Same thing with the average rainfall. So this is inches per year, goes, this last class from 9 down to about 0, all the way up to, just under 200 inches in places like the Olympic Peninsula. So, and then I've got average income for the United States. Oops, I got to turn off the rainfall. So this is for counties. So this is, from under 16,000 a year up to about 64, almost 65,000 a year, and that's only in a couple of the really dense metropolitan areas around San Francisco and New York and so forth. You would be surprised that some places that you feel like you can make a good living, their average income is pretty low. Kind of the same thing with things like percent educated, right? So this is anywhere from just below 7% up to only a few places that are 45, almost 46% educated. The average in the United States is about 12% of folks with a 4-year degree or higher, right? And then biomes, right? So do you want to live in a desert or a temperate conifer forest, so on and so forth. All right, so when we look at all these different things, how do you figure out what the best settings are? Well, one way to do it is to, turn on all of the cities and then zoom into one. So if you had a couple of things like average income and education turned on, and you zoomed into, and let's just turn off all and go to some cities that I know. So what is the average income of, say, Bend, Oregon? So if I were to zoom into Bend and then click on Bend, you'll get a pop-up that'll give us some information about that. So average income, and that's Deschutes, and we scroll down here, average income is around almost $28,000 a year, right? And what about education? So the percent educated, I'll have to scroll over, is around almost 17%. So you get a sense, so then you can start setting the different variables inside the model. All right? All right. Oops, zoom out. I'm going to turn off some of these things and turn off my first round of picks. And sorry, I only have data for the continental United States. It's just hard to get full data sets for all of the US, but you can dig around and find them if you want. So to do the model building thing, first you go to your catalog pane and then take a look in your toolbox. So every time you make a new project in ArcPro, it's going to make you a toolbox. I've already made a couple of tools and we'll get to those in a second. But to make a new model, you would right click, new, and say model. And it's going to open up a new model for you. On this model, then it's going to open up kind of the model menu, and you can go to properties for that menu, and this is where you can name it. So I'm just going to call it test model, and it's always a good idea to name your tools and your outputs in any ARC products, and then store relative toolpath. I think that's a good one. I'll say OK, and then in order for this to become permanent, you have to save it. So I'll hit save. Great. Okay, so how you would work it is, let's just say I'm going to drag some data. So I'm going to grab my average income and drag it onto the model field. And then you can grab tools either from up here. So with this drop down, I'm going to just type in select. And if you double click on select, it'll put it there on the screen. So I'm going to just click on average income and drag the arrow over to select tool and then tell it it's an input feature. So there we go. So blue circles represent data going into a model. Yellow squares usually are tools, and then these green circles are your output data. So let's go into the settings for this selection. I've had some strange docking things where menus dock up high, so if you just resize them a little bit, you can get to them. So average income is going in, and then instead of letting it put it just into the geodatabase for this project, I have a little piece of code here, and this is called Scratch GDB, and it's got a % sign, Scratch GDB % sign, and then backslash, and then this is going to become best income, right? Let's get an E on there. Great, and then you have to add an expression. So create an expression, and then you have to scroll down and find the average income right there, and it's going to be equal to or greater than, and I'm going to go with about 50,000. So that's quite a bit, right? Not too many counties in the country are making 50 grand or more. You could go less, you could go more, but we'll just go with that for now. And then you have to hit save or OK. So that's pretty much how you do it. I'm also going to take a look at education. So do that, and I'm going to bring another select, and I'm going to go ahead and add another one because I know I'm going to need both of them. So I'm going to put one down here. So that's going to be this one. And I'm going to need one also to select out my cities. So I'm going to drag my cities out here. Great. So I'm going to connect. This is going to be input. And connect that one. And that's going to be my input. Great. And then there's this great little button up here called Auto Layout. And that'll just clean everything up. Okay. All right. So we still need to work with the selection for the education. Come on. All right, and I'm going to get rid of this big path and put my Scratch geodatabase in there, and this is going to be best ed. U. And then we have to set an expression of some kind, and this is going to be % educated, and this turns out is, and menus are really strange right now in Arc Pro. I don't know why. And once you select what you're actually after, if you hit the little SQL button, then it allows you to build out some SQL. So this one I'm going to use the between function. So BETW, and then once it shows up, you just hit enter. And in this particular case, I'm going to be looking for educated between, say, like 0.15 for 15, and then I'll type in the word and once that shows up, there we go, and 0.20 for 20%, right? And hit enter, and it likes it, and we'll hit, oops, don't want that extra return, and I'll hit OK. Cool. And then my cities also, I need to set some selections for those. So again, I'm going to put it in my Scratch workspace. Let's pull this out and drag it down. Man, it's just giving me a hard time. This is going to be best cities. And what we're trying to do here is set the overall population for cities. So we'll put a new expression. This is going to be POP 2010. And we're looking for is less than or equal to, and I'm going to go for 40,000. I don't want to live in too big of a city. Okay. And you can always hit the little green checkbox and just check and see if it likes it. And then it hides the OK button though. You'll have to, yeah, there we go. All right, so we've got one more tool, and you can drag tools or double click out of this toolbox or from the geoprocessing menu. You can also do it. So let's get the Intersect tool. And there it is, and you'll just, I want to highlight, I want to drag it onto my field. Yep. All right. And so what we want to do is intersect the average income and the education. So I'm just going to drag these into the intersect. That's an input feature. Drag this one in. Input feature. Great. I have to go in here and again work with all those parameters that we were working with before. In this case, I'm just going to put this also in my Scratch workspace. And this is just going to be intersect. Great. And that's going to become the tool I use to clip my cities by. So I'm going to find the clip tool, double click on it, and there it is. And the output of the intersect is going to end up being the clip feature. And what's it going to be clipping? And my best cities are going to be the input feature. And then I'll double up and go in here. Man, these things are all over the place today. And where's it going? In this particular case, because it's clipping, I want this to become my final output. So I'm going to put this into my main geodatabase for this project and in my featured data set. And I'm just going to call this my best cities. Actually, I'm going to call it KevPix because I already have best city somewhere. So KevPix 2, and I already have that in there. Let's make it KevPix 3. Okay. And everything looks good. All right. Super. And I'm going to hit the auto layout again just to clean it up. I'm going to save my model. And real quick, I'm going to go over to Catalog. And then I'm going to go inside of my folders and the model builder folder. And there's a Scratch geodatabase in there because that's from a previous run. I'm going to delete that just so I can show you when we come back that that little bit of code is actually going to create that geodatabase. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our model and test model, that's what we were working on. And then we're going to run it. Actually, I'm going to hit validate first. It'll only give me an error if it finds a problem. Didn't find anything, and then I'm going to hit run. So when the model's running, the red means that the tool is working. So it works through these things. It's selecting from average income, from education. Now it's intersecting. The intersect tool usually takes the longest, and now it's clipping it. And when it's finished, we can also grab this guy up here and take a look. Warning, empty output generated. That happens sometimes. So that means that even though it selected all these things out, for at some point there was a problem. And I think I know what it was because I changed one thing. So what I'm going to do is, first thing I'm going to have to do is go back to my catalog. I'm going to have to refresh my folder here, and you'll see the Scratch geodatabase. And this is the problem if you run these tools on their own. You'll have to go and clean out the Scratch geodatabase every time. So let me go ahead and delete that. Yep, I want to get rid of those. So now the Scratch is cleaned out. And now, if we go back to our test model, if we hit the validate, it'll get rid of all those under drop shadows, which were letting us know that the tool had intermediate data. I think I know what the problem was, is that I messed around with my percent educated. So let's go in here. Yes, I saw I had in between. So I'm going to remove that one. I'm going to add a new expression once I bring this down where we can see it. And we're just going to go with greater than 20%. So percent educated is going to be greater than or equal to 0.20. And see if it likes it. It does. Say OK. Cool. I'm going to save the model and I'm going to run it one more time. See if we get lucky. All right, it did run, and apparently it has an output. So now I can go over to Catalog. I'm going to go to my database, and I'm going to refresh my main database, and then look inside my featured data set. There it is, KevPix 3. Right-click on that one and say Add to the current map. And then we'll go over to the map and take a look. All right, so we did get a few. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on labeling on those guys. So it looks like with those parameters, I'm going to have to live in some pretty high-end places, right? So I'm going to have to live in the Bay Area. Yeah. And around Inverness, Point Reyes, those are nice places. I wouldn't mind living in those, but I know it's going to be pricey, right? Muir Beach, all these places are pretty expensive. What else did it put me in? I think it put me some places over here in Colorado. Let's zoom in and take a look. Oh yeah, Aspen. Boy, and Snowmass Village. Going to need some money to live there. And then what else? Put me on a couple places over here on the East Coast. Nantucket, I think it is, yep. So I guess I could live in Nantucket if I was going to be a whaler. And then a couple of areas like Falls Church, yep, just outside of DC. Okay, so maybe not necessarily the ideal places for me, but those were the parameters that I set within the model. Okay, so that was just the test model. Let me turn that guy off. And let's take a look. So I've built another model that has all these different ones. I'm going to get rid of this expression for now because that is for another part of that. Okay, so I've added average rainfall, pop density, education, biomes, average income, right? If you hover over the tool, it'll tell you, so this is a rain between 12 and 18 inches, pop density between 30 and 50 people per square mile, education between 15 and 25%, biomes looking like deserts, Mediterranean forests, temperate mixed forest, and temperate conifer forests. And then for the average income between 20 and 30,000 a year, right? And then for my cities, I went with less than or equal to 70,000 people. And so once you run all of those things together, and then it'll kick them out. And I added a feature class to feature class, which will just put it into my main geo database. So it'll get rid of the clipped one back there. Now I got to make sure that my biomes is cleaned out, or excuse me, my scratch geo database. So right click and refresh there. And then I'll have to open that guy up and take a look. Yep, so I got to get rid of these, because if you have things named the same in the model, it'll kick you an error if it's trying to overwrite data. So let's delete these guys. Very good. And now back to this one. Okay, super. I'm going to hit save this model, and I'm going to hit validate just to see if there's any problems. It doesn't seem so, and then I'm going to let it run and see what we get. So it's working through all these. Now the intersect will probably take a little bit longer because there's a lot more data going into it. And then it's going to clip my cities, my best cities, that is only a selection of the overall population in each city by an intersect of all these different parameters. It's thinking. It's going to get there. So there are endless combinations. You can play with this for a long time, and eventually you'll get the model tuned to kind of finding the ideal place for you to live. So let's take a quick look. Looks like it ran, it succeeded. I gotta be able to close this though, there we go. And then you see all of these little drop shadows means that there's intermediate data in the tool, okay? So I'll go over to catalog, and then I'm gonna have to refresh my main geodatabase, the model builder, and then under best places, KevPick 6 is what that one was named. I'm going to add it to the current map, and I'm going to go over, and whoa, we got everything. There's a little glitch. For some reason, it keeps adding the best cities, but never fear. All right, let's take a look and label these. So there we go. If I go to labeling, I can get these to label a little bit better by just clicking on this basic offset point. Maybe. Come on. It's thinking. Couple of good places in there. Let's see, Sisters in Oregon. I could live there. Yeah, absolutely. Idaho Falls, Swan Valley, those are pretty nice. Looks like Arc Pro is having a hard time. All I want to do is change how it labels. There we go. There we go, clean those up a little bit. So those meet all the parameters that was set in that model, right? So this works, this would be fine, but the one problem is that every time you want to change things, you'd have to go back. You'd have to go in and change different parts, and you would also have to go to our catalog and then refresh down here in your model builder, and then delete everything inside the Scratch geodatabase to rerun it. That's kind of a pain. If I go over to another model, so this is the best of us model. So this is very similar to the one I just showed you. I've just added the 30-year temperature, but you'll also notice I have all these expressions. And expressions are basically the selection inside this tool of selection. And then the little p means it's been set as a parameter. And let me show you how I did that back on this older model. So if I wanted to do it on this guy, I would right click and then go to create variable, and then from parameter, and then expression. And it's going to pop up this little guy here. And then I would right click on that one and tell it that it's a parameter. And once I've done that, that means the tool can be run in the geoprocessing realm. So because I've done that in all of the different tools inside this best of the US one, then I can go over to our catalog and then look inside my model builder, and then I can right click on my best of the US and say add to favorites. It's grayed out now because I already have added it to my favorites. And now I'll go to the map. I'm going to turn off these kev picks. And if I go to my geoprocessing here, and I'm going to go back, and under favorites, there it is. There's my model. And because I've set parameters, when I double click on it, it's a tool inside of the geoprocessing environment. And so there's everything that I have set. And you can change them here. The other cool thing about this is that when it runs, it will delete everything out of the Scratch workspace. So it's important though to scroll down and check. There might be some internal errors like this internal error. If you just click on this SQL expression, it usually will fix those. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for each one of these. Okay, looks like everything is ready to rock. One thing I do need to check is back in Arc Catalog to make sure that the Scratch geodatabase doesn't have anything in it. No, it does. I'm just going to go ahead and delete it. It's going to recreate it because I used that little bit of code. Okay, there we go. Back to map, back to geoprocessing. Looks like everything is good. One thing to always be sure is that the output feature class has a decent name on it. I'm going to put 10 just in case I already have a 9 inside the geodatabase. All right, no errors. Everything looks fine. And I'll run it. And the disadvantage is you don't get to see it go through the flowchart, but it does give you this kind of prompt that lets you know if the tools are working. There we go. It's working through things. Looks like it's clipping it already. Great, and then you can hit the scroll down and see, yep, it did complete, looks good, all green, fantastic. And now, go to Arc Catalog, and I'll refresh my geodatabase. Kind of wish this refreshed automatically, but what I want and what they do are two different things. Right click on my KevPix output, add to map, let's go to my map, and there we go. So turn on the labeling on that. Very good. So that one only picked 4 different cities out of all those in the United States: Bend, Missoula, Bismarck, and Rapid City. And the reason for that limited selection is because I fine-tuned that model around Missoula, and I found out what all the parameters were by just clicking on Missoula with the, all the variables turned on and looking at what Missoula's statistics were. I could live in Missoula, because I do, but I could also live in Bend. Don't know about Bismarck, a little bit cold. Rapid City, I've had a good night in Rapid City. All right, so that's the basics of Model Builder. It's a little bit tricky. Down in the description, I'll give you a geodatabase with all of this data, and I'll also throw a copy of the Toolbox with the best of the US model in it. On your computer, you're probably going to have to go into each one of the tools and set the paths and make sure that everything lines up correctly, but you should be able to get it to work. All right, that's all I have for you today. If this was helpful, please give the video a like. And if the channel's been good for you, go ahead and subscribe, and that'll help me out a lot. Have a good evening and take care.